Assalamu alaikum and welcome to another session on IT and Automation Academy. As I promised with you guys after commissioning webinar that we are going to come up again on this YouTube channel about SCADA. So today I have a very important guest with me, Rafi Shahid. He have a very vast experience in ignition SCADA. So I would be inviting Rafi Shahid to talk about that more. So here is a introduction about Rafi Shahid. He is expert in ignition SCADA. So I'm going to invite Rafi Shahid to talk further about that. I think you guys are able to, if you guys are able to hear me properly, do confirm first. Please let me know if you guys are able to hear me properly. Okay. I think we have 21 folks already joined us. So let me know if you're able to hear me properly. And then we can start up our session. Okay, I think about the voice quality, is it fine? So I'm going to invite now Rafi to talk about further.
Hello, Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Um, Noman, first of all, as always, thank you so much for inviting me in. Everybody, I'm wearing a mask. It's COVID season, as you all know. I would encourage everybody who's there at your homes to start wearing a mask. It does help, as the experts say. So that's one request, and that's why I started this meeting or this presentation today with the mask on. I will take it off, but just to get everyone started, I did request so that I do request everyone
Perfect.
who's watching to please wear the mask. So if we could start sharing the my screen, Numan, we could. Okay, everybody. Today's session, I'm going to be, as you can see on my cap, I'm an ignition. I don't like to call myself an expert. I'm an ignition guy. I'm an ignition fan. I've still got to learn a lot more about ignition. But today, my plan is to teach, not teach, but at least give you a guidance on how you guys can also start learning about ignition SCADA. What is the next step? What is the first step? And how you guys can start your journey from to become an ignition SCADA expert. A bit of I'll start with an introduction of myself. I'm assuming everybody on the live show is knows about what SCADA is. SCADA stands for Supervisory Control and Data Acquisition. It's used in factories, oil and gas, beverage, um, solar systems, and a whole lot of industries worldwide. So in today's session, we're going to be just diving in a bit deep on how to start your journey on becoming an ignition SCADA person or ignition SCADA expert. Um, Today's presentation, a bit of an introduction about myself, and then introduction of SCADA systems, demonstration of ignition SCADA. I'm gonna run the ignition SCADA demo application that Inductive Automation hosts on their website, um, and then we're gonna learn about how you guys can start developing a similar system for yourself. We're gonna learn about how you need to learn about databases um, and the journey. Python is an important language that is used in the ignition process, in the ignition SCADA system. So I'm going to give you a brief overview of how you can learn that as well. Here's my LinkedIn profile. So if anybody who's watching wants to connect with me via LinkedIn, you guys can just scan the QR code or search for my name on LinkedIn, and I'd love to connect. I've got a lot of people who I'm connected with on LinkedIn, and I love learning about what people are doing with their SCADA systems and what their career journey is like. So feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. We're going to start with what is SCADA. I start with one of the people the who is the lead of Ignition, who is one of the persons who is obviously Ignition is not a product developed by one person; it's a whole team effort. But I would like to start with with a video from them. So, what is SCADA from Inductive Automation?
We often get asked, what is SCADA? A SCADA system, at its most basic, is a software system that's used for controlling, monitoring, and analyzing an industrial process. These systems are used in basically every industrial process in the world. Some examples include water and wastewater systems, petrochemical systems, food and beverage, manufacturing, utilities, the list goes on and on. The SCADA system starts by communicating with, in real time, with the controllers out in the field that are running the actual process. Typically, these will be PLCs or RTUs. So the SCADA system will gather real-time information from these field controllers, and it brings them all into the SCADA system where they are then typically presented using a graphical user interface to the operators that are running the process. This allows the operators to see in real time what the process is doing. They can react to alarms, they can control the process, change settings, things like that. The SCADA system also will often include some sort of historian product so that this real-time process information can be tracked over the long term. This historical data can then be used to create charts, run reports, and that way the operators, in addition to seeing what's currently happening, can see what happened in the past and make predictions about what will happen in the future of their process. At Inductive Automation, we make SCADA software that's easier to use and has less restrictive licensing and is built on modern technology. It's called Ignition, the new SCADA. To learn more about it, visit our website at inductiveautomation.com.
So that was the introduction to SCADA. I've kept it brief because I want to dive more into the technical stuff in today's presentation instead of just focusing on discussing Ignition. So our first step today would be launching a demo of Ignition. Anybody who's watching on a laptop and has their cell phone handy, I would request you to kind of scan this QR code, and that will allow you to launch the Ignition application, a demo application of Ignition on your cell phones directly. So if you could go ahead and scan this QR code, or if you have you could choose to open either of those two QR codes, both will work. I already have that open. So I'm gonna, because I have to share my screen, I have this already open here, and I'm gonna show this to you on this website. So that link would open up this web page right here. It gives you an introduction of about how Ignition works. Of the bunch of applications. So basically, Ignition allows you to monitor real-time statuses. You could have real-time status of the machine or of a process plant. Everything you can monitor basically in your in real time from your laptop, cell phone, tablet, whatever you may have. Now, in this screen right here, I do want to point out there's two approaches to SCADA screen design. There is the traditional approach, which is much more graphical, much more colors and everything. And then now in modern SCADA design, it's basically the approach is taken where you have a high performance HMI graphics. You could use Ignition to design both. Um, there's a I mean, this is a complete science in itself to a certain extent. Um, but I would recommend that there's a book that I can recommend later on that you can read in order to differentiate between high performance and traditional SCADA design. Basically, what you would see here is the difference where this has a lot few colors versus here. So in when you're looking at a screen all day long as an operator, you only want to focus their attention on certain things. You don't want to have a lot of colors on a screen because this is not a movie or a video game. This is critical infrastructure. So you only have high colors uh, where needed. Then let's have a look at demo apps. I'm going to start with a water wastewater project. There's multiple ways, multiple processes can be monitored. I mean, that will completely depend on what the process is at the time. But here, let's say we've got a water wastewater treatment, a water treatment process. This is a demo version, so this is not really an actual process. But here we have a bunch of filters on a line, and the current status of how they're running. Um, Bunch of pumps, how they're running, are they in auto mode, are they in on mode, and then logging. So if you remember a couple of minutes ago, we in the video we had discussed, he discussed about historical data. This is what that is. This basically is focusing. Now if I move my wheel cursor, what I'm doing is moving the wheel cursor on my mouse, and if you can see, I can zoom into that data. Now this is historical data. Right now this is running in California time, so it's somewhere around, I don't know what time zone this is running at, but this is looking at about 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. California time. I'm assuming 4:22 a.m. And you can look back till 1 p.m. yesterday on this graphical representation. On this graphical representation, you can zoom in, zoom out, and you can see that the timeline is changing accordingly. So this is some of the stuff that SCADA or Ignition SCADA allows you to do. Obviously, the screen design will change from process to process. It would be completely different for a meat processing plant. It would be completely different for a water treatment plant. It would be completely different for for a building automation project if need be. So moving back to my presentation. Uh, so let's have a look at the no, let's have a look at the architecture, and then if need be, I'll go back to the ignition stuff later on. Basically, how the ignition SCADA system works is basically you've got a bunch of PLCs. So we considered a water treatment process. Let's consider a factory that let's say makes cookies, for example. So if a factory is making cookies, it may be making multiple types of cookies, and those cookies are being, the raw material is being mixed, water is being added, those cookies are being baked, those cookies are being conveyed from one machine to the other. Those cookies might, after being baked, need to be packed, and then after being packed into individual wrappers, they need to be put into a carton, and then those cartons need to be put into a palletizer. All of those machines will have individual PLCs in them. So once you do have those PLCs are then networked together over a plant-wide network, just like you would in an office environment where you have bunch of office computers. Instead of office computers, you'll be having PLCs. Those PLCs are then connected to a centralized server. Within this server is where the Ignition SCADA software is installed and runs. The SCADA server communicates to the database. Now, the beauty of Ignition is it can work with a lot of different databases, uh, but universally or primarily, most integrators would be working with either MySQL or Microsoft SQL Server. So those are the two primary ones that people generally use. But Ignition can run on MariaDB, it can run on Oracle, it can run on a whole host of others as well. It depends on what the customer requires, but generally it's going to be MySQL or Microsoft SQL Server. Yeah, I forgot to mention as point number 3 here, Liz, that obviously these can be PLCs, but these can also be energy meters that act as RTUs, remote terminal units. These could be a bunch of sensors that have intelligent Ethernet ports available on them. And then there's displays. Now, all the data that is being collected from the PLC into the Ignition server needs to be demonstrated or shown to human beings. That is done by either panel PCs. One of those we just saw in the video where two gentlemen were standing in front of an industrial cabinet that had a screen on it. That was a panel PC. You could have web launch clients with Ignition 8. There's Perspective, which is the new Ignition version, which allows you to launch the SCADA platform, the SCADA application in a web browser. And then with the mobile, Ignition Perspective also has a mobile app. So you could have, instead of running Ignition on a web browser such as Google Chrome on Ignition, you would be able to run it on a native app. Now, having Ignition run on a native app gives you the advantage of having access to your location, your gyroscope on the cell phone. So you basically, the direction of your cell phone, how you tilt it, that Ignition can get access to. Your location, Ignition can get access to. Your camera can be used to scan barcodes. So not only can Ignition be used for SCADA, traditional SCADA purposes, it can be used for other purposes as well, such as inventory tracking, if need be. So here is the Ignition software stack. I see a question on the chat where people are asking for the advantages of Ignition versus other SCADA softwares. Um, Maybe some other time we'll do a webinar on that. I don't. I like the question. I want to discuss it, but I want to focus on what I have listed out right now for you. That was question. So Ignition being the let's have a look at the Ignition software stack. At the bottom of the stack, obviously, is the operating system of the native device. So if in case of a computer, it could be Windows, it could be Windows Pro, it could be Windows Home, it could be Windows Server. Either of those three platforms work. You can also run the beauty of Ignition is because it's Java based, it can run on it's kind of platform or OS independent. So it can run on Linux, it can run on OS X. With Ignition perspective, the application, the app can be installed on an iOS running, so Apple cell phones or an Android cell phone. Both will work. Then on top of that is where you install the platform. So there you have all the connections, everything that's basic to Ignition is in this in this layer here. Now, on top of the Ignition platform is where you install the modules. So you can have the Ignition platform installed on your computer without any modules. You won't really be able to do much. So in order to be able to communicate or achieve whatever you need to achieve, you have to have Ignition modules. So it's like having a car with a lot of options. Sometimes when you get a car, you can buy. A car is not the perfect example. I'm trying to think of another one, but let's consider it this way. So you can buy a chassis. Well, you can buy the base platform. I don't want to use the car example right now. So you can buy the base platform, but it doesn't really have a whole lot. And then you can buy the pieces of the software that you need to use in your project. Those pieces of software are called modules. These modules are, let's have a look at the core modules first. So there's Ignition Perspective. So that allows you to have to build screens for cell phones. There's Ignition Vision, which was the traditional approach to SCADA, where you could launch your Ignition projects or screens on a computer. The SQL Bridge. So the SQL Bridge allows you to have a connection between the Ignition server and the database. So if we go back to the previous image, so what allows you to have this connection here is the SQL Bridge. The tag historian allows you to easily store tag history. So once you have a connection with these PLCs have data points called tags. Those tags are then connected. Those tags are then pulled into Ignition and then can be stored. The history of those tags can be stored easily into the database. That is for tag historian. Reporting. Obviously, all the data you're storing here needs to be converted into some sort of a report for these people who are accessing the system to be useful. So it could be daily production, it could be daily temperatures, it could be daily, energy usage, whatever. All the module that allows you to create those reports is called the reporting module. There's alarm notification. So there could be situations where you need to alert someone about something going wrong in the process. So let's say there's a water tank that's being filled, it's almost full, it's going to overflow very soon. You need to notify someone. So obviously it's showing you on the screen, but nothing's happening. In this situation, you could send out emails, you could send out phone calls, you could send out SMS messages, and there's an option where you could also send out WhatsApp messages. It's a bit tricky, but it can be done and has. There's an additional software that you have to purchase, which is from a separate company in order to be able to do that. There's enterprise administration. So the enterprise administration module is an interesting one. So let's say you have 5, 6, 7 factories and you have a central head office. So in that situation, you would have this setup in, let's say, 5 different factories, and you would have an Ignition server in a central. I forgot to add that image here. But So you would have a central server in the head office, which would be able to control all the servers in all the 7 factories located around the world. That is what the enterprise administration module is used for. OPC UA. Naman has a couple of very interesting videos on this. But OPC UA is the software that it's the module that allows you to have the connection between the PLC and the ignition server. So there are most PLCs talk to ignition using OPC UA. There's an option of having using MQTT also, but that is a slightly different approach. Most PLCs do not support MQTT natively at the moment. Some do, but for that, you will have to have an MQTT module installed in ignition as well. So when I talk about MQTT, um, that's where IIoT or Internet of Things comes along. Um, good question. Someone's asking me how to send an alarm via SMS. That's a separate discussion. Get back to me on LinkedIn. I will show you. There's a company called Cirrus Links that's been established by the inventor by the co-inventor of the MQTT protocol. His company specializes in creating modules for ignition and other platforms, but primarily for ignition for use with IIoT or MQTT. With IIoT protocols, you can connect to a whole host of different. Um, it opens up a whole host of new possibilities with Internet of Things. So we can get into that a bit later as well. And then there's Sepasoft. Sepasoft is the company that develops MES solutions built on Ignition's core SCADA software. MES is manufacturing execution systems. MES is basically there's a separate video of mine, not advertising Numan, but just letting people know. There's a separate video of mine in Urdu translating and explaining MES and where it stands in the automation stack. So, and then obviously there's user created applications. So I've kind of covered this section here for you, and I'm going to cover this section on top here. Obviously, there's a SCADA application, real-time monitoring of the process. There's alarming. Anytime there's a critical issue with the process, you have to trigger an alarm. The alarm notification could be on screen, it could be on a cell phone, by a phone call, it could be on a buzzer that's going on in a process. It could be SMS messages, it could be WhatsApp messages, whatever you want. And then there's HMIs. One thing I want to point out, and I've seen this confusion happen a few times. Some people think that it is generally the major alarming is triggered by the PLC itself. So if a machine has a problem, the machine has to have software inside it that will stop it from going into an emergency or a critical state. So the PLC stops itself when there is a problem. It's not the job of the SCADA software to do that. It is to machine safety is dependent on the machine PLC. So just clarifying that. Reporting, I've kind of explained. Mobile, I've kind of explained. IIoT and MES, I've kind of explained. How can you start learning? So this is where I want to get into how you guys can start learning about inductive automation. So the beauty of Ignition, and one of the best things I think these guys have done, is give you the ability to download and learn the software on your own. So there's no restriction. You don't really need a teacher to at least get your basic understanding of Ignition. It's easy. So there's a website. I've got a Google here, so it's very simple. Go on Google, type in Ignition SCADA Inductive University, or much more easier, just scan this QR code on this presentation skill. It'll open up that website on your smartphone. And oops. There we go. I already have that connected, set up here. So what that's going to do is it's going to bring you up to this website here. All you do is sign in and start training. So once you sign in, you log in. Should be showing that. Hold on 1 second. Let me log in and get in. Yes, so Dipesh has just sent out a question with, is this application for free for students to practice and get some? Yes, that is one of the best things with Ignition. You can download it for free and start playing with it. And I'll be happy to kind of show you what that is. Oh, interestingly, I had completed everything, and there's a new video that I haven't completed, and it's showing me at 99%. So uh, you can go start reviewing Ignition, watch all the videos, clear the topics, take the tests, and you will start learning Ignition today. It's absolutely free. Go to this website, register yourself, um, start watching the videos, start taking the tests, and you can get started for Ignition for free. Basically, all you need is to put in your time and dedication. So that's where I wanted to kind of show you guys with Inductive University. Um, with Ignition, you will need to have Python knowledge. So let's have a look at Python as well. Um, there's obviously a lot of Python books. When I started researching initially Python, and I've taken advanced Python classes at IA as well. But with Python, I would recommend, if you are from an electrical engineering background. I was originally an electrical engineering background or an electronics engineering background. Um, we were taught C++ or C sharp. I don't even remember, to be honest. But Python is obviously a newer language that is not being taught to electrical engineers in a lot of institutes that I know of. Maybe it might be different in your case. But for me, what made it easier for me would be this course on Python from University of Michigan. Again, QR code scan, or you can just type this into Google. I've got this link open right here. So that's Python by Professor uh, Charles Russell Severance. I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly. From the University of Michigan. I did go through this, and I do recommend everybody who's looking to learn Ignition, please go through this yourself. It took me a weekend to do the first session, so it's a if you have a weekend available, so 19 hours per course roughly, so you can kind of complete it. If you're just working your Saturdays and Sundays, you should be able to do it in a month's time. So if you're just putting in this time on Saturdays and Sundays. So the last section is the last thing I wanted to discuss with you guys. Obviously, when you get SQL is not something we're taught as electrical engineers. So that is something you're going to have to learn on your own. I did take classes on Microsoft SQL Server, and I did take classes on MySQL as well to be able to learn this. Um, Simpler queries are easier, but when you start getting into trickier stuff, you really need to go back to the books. So I would recommend purchasing books for MySQL and Microsoft SQL Server, but for starters, get an introduction to MySQL, intro to SQL from Coursera. Obviously, Ignition does not teach SQL. The other thing I wanted to recommend is maybe go, instead of starting with Ignition directly, I would recommend you take these SQL and Python classes first. It really does. So yeah, it's nice to have Ignition skills right at the start, but I would kind of recommend personally to start with the basics. It does not take a whole lot of time, but it's a good starting point. So once you get into the more difficult videos in IA, all of this completed work that you'll have at the back of your mind somewhere would really start explaining these things automatically. So that's kind of what I have for you guys today. Um, I wanted to keep it within the 40-minute limit that Noman had set for me. So I think I've got enough time for questions. So I'm going to start reviewing the questions I have so far in the uh, in the in the in the chat. So what is the difference between HMI and SCADA? So this is from Amirul Irfan Usman. The difference between HMI and SCADA. Noman, do you want to help
Yeah,
me
that's
out on
what
this one?
I was trying to say. Like, I would try to help you, and you better take questions, and you would start with one by one, because I think First of all, thank you very much. The way you actually showed different opportunities to IT and Automation Academy's family, it seems like people are very happy, and because it's a learning track. If anybody is interested, he can have a complete ignition SCADA learning. At least he can start feeling comfortable, and he can grab some good opportunity in the market. So you have
Yes.
explained the things in a better way, and then when you are actually doing it, then you can actually practice and excel one by one. So I would be here to help you for the question. So okay, how long is that webinar? First, this done already. So it was just 1 hour maximum we limit we have today. And what else? Is this only time it is offered with certificate? Okay, for the certificate, most of the people are actually interested to join the webinar just because of the certificate. First of all, very important thing what I want to say in this webinar, guys, please, please, please don't go for certificates. Certificates are just a piece of paper. Skill set is
Exactly.
that matters. Okay. So if you are here just for certificates, I definitely, advertise it in a way that 3 people will get a certificate, and that's my commitment, and I would complete it. 3 folks from your end who have a very genuine question based on our discussion would be entitled for a certificate. And you guys need to watch it till then. I will explain you about the process. Now it's better to get the questions cleared. So, but for sure, Rafi, you want to throw some light on that?
Well, I do strongly agree. Look, certificates are important to kind of put, so they have their place. So sometimes when you're putting, let me put it this way. I mean, it's going to come out a bit rough on the edges, but yes, certificates are slightly important. But I've seen a lot of people who have certificates but can't do what their certificate says they can do. So let's just uh,
Yeah,
that's
right.
so their certificate says, oh, they have advanced PLC programming skills, and
Mhm.
then you see, oh no, not really. That's not the case. Or if it says they have got advanced MySQL skills, not really. So yes, they have. Yes, it
Yeah,
says
right.
yes, it's possible, but I've seen enough times to know. So keep the other thing I would say is, keep sharpening the saw. That's one of the things that somebody taught me in a class some long time ago. Is you will start to forget things also. There's a lot of things about ignition I've forgotten. I have to revise, again and again. There's classes, so it's going to be the same with you. Keep learning again and again. So I'll have to. I've sometimes have to watch. I'm pretty sure I've gone over the Inductive University 3 or 4 times myself. So every time so you will have to go through these things again and again. And the same with MySQL and Microsoft SQL Server.
Okay,
Wow,
that's
there's a
pretty
whole
much
lot
it.
of questions.
So
So
we got a questions. I want to know more about industrial communication and its
that's
relation between SCADA, like how
that's
it's
a very good
important for
question.
communication. Yeah, that's a good question.
Very
Yeah.
good question. Very good question. So who's this question from?
I put his name also on the screen.
So
And I
Basim.
would be I would be pointing the comments on there, and all those we questions that we are actually addressing, these question would be on the screen also.
Okay, Basim, this is a very good question. Basim, so the communication between PLCs we discussed. Oh, I've could you put on this the presentation on the screen as well?
Sure.
So for everybody who's watching, and the question is, what is I want to know more about industrial communication and its relation between it and SCADA. So industrial communication basically, the way I understand his question is he's talking about the communication between the PLC and the SCADA server. Now,
Yep.
there's multiple communication protocols that are out there for communication between PLCs. So it could be between a PLC and a PLC. It could be between a SCADA server and a PLC, or between some equipment and a PLC. So Siemens has Profibus and Profinet. Profibus is on a serial cable. Uh, Profinet is on an Ethernet cable. Allen Bradley used to have DH Plus or Data Highway Plus. Now they have, or DeviceNet. Now they have oh, I think they have Ethernet IP. So most traditionally that most PLCs were using proprietary serial communications. Now they're moving on to open. Some are moving on to open communication. Now the third one is Modbus, which is very popular. So those PLCs that are in the $200-300 range would generally, except Siemens and Allen Bradley, would support Modbus protocol. So a lot of so let's say Unitronics, you say Delta, Fartech, all of these brands would support Modbus serial or then Modbus TCP. So Modbus TCP when you're using Ethernet, and Modbus serial when you're using serial cables or RS485 or RS232 cables. So that's those are the bunch of communication protocols. Now the other thing is OPC UAs. The other thing is OPC. So OPC is a standard where sometimes you have an OPC server built into some of the PLCs. So for example, some ABB PLCs have OPC UA servers built into it, and then the ignition server, so the ignition module, this module right here, the OPC UA module, is able to communicate to it directly. So between an OPC server, OPC UA server, and an OPC UA server. This is the same module that is used when you have third-party OPC UA servers. For example, if you have Kepware, or if you have Moticon, and there's another brand. There's two others. One's German and one's another one from Korea, or I can't remember the name right now. I'll put that on the chat list later on. So those are the industrial communication protocols that we're talking about that are there and that you need to learn. The new one is the MQTT. So now newer PLCs such as Easy Automation have MQTT built into them. Siemens S7-1200 is, I think, now bringing in MQTT. So that is the other protocol that is now coming in and is working now as an industrial protocol as well. So in industrial communication space as well. So I think that's what I've covered. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, next question we have, okay, that's about webinar timing. That I think dependent on the availability of mentor who is coming up on the show. And that's why, sometime I have a very limited choice. Even I have removed my few classes, online classes that were here today to be scheduled today, and I left out that classes. That's why I schedule it at the right time, which is best for everyone, because this window is where our YouTube audience is most available, like between 6 to 8. That's why we kept it this time. We will try to change it, but as we have to look an eye on everyone, that's why it's sometime I can't promise this thing. Okay.
Got a very interesting question from Fakhri Yasir. I wanna kind of take that, please. So Mr. Fakhri Yasir is: do I need third party to store a database or other feature, or is it already included in Ignition? So there's two approaches. You could use third party software such as Moticon or Kepware if you want to store data directly from a PLC into a database. So you don't really need a SCADA software in the middle in that situation. But if you want to really massage that data and put it in a more, so it would be just be logging data. So it'd be at 3:30 p.m. 41 degrees, at 3:32 p.m. 42 degrees, 3:33 p.m. 30. So it's going to be just a log, or it's just like putting values on a register, and there's no real you can't really do a whole lot of intelligence on that data. So yes, it's possible using products such as Kepware, PTC Kepware, or Moticon solutions, but it depends on your requirement precisely. So that's why I wanted to kind of say. So you could use Ignition, yes, but it depends on what exactly your requirement is. Can Python play any role in PLC and SCADA? Python is all about coding mainly in data science. No, actually, I disagree with main MAINMTE. Python is actually used quite a bit in Ignition. So yes, it is part of. It's not used a whole lot in PLC programming. I agree with you on the first part, but it is quite important when it comes to SCADA software, especially when you're working with Ignition. So I disagree with the second part. Machine learning. Oh, my favorite. So this is from Prince Dubai. I'm struggling to pronounce it properly. Dubaria. I hope I am right. Hello, has ignition. Oops, where did that question go? How to implement machine learning with SCADA? There's a very interesting video. If you search for that on Google, Ignition kind of they guide you how to connect. So basically, you will have data coming in from the PLCs here and being put into the Ignition server. And from the Ignition server, you're going to be pushing it out to AWS's using Cirrus. So there's two options. Basically, Cirrus Links makes a module that allows you to push that data into AWS or Azure, and then in Azure, excuse me, in Azure you can use one, or in AWS you can use one of their services, um, their machine learning services to do the machine learning on that data. Very good question, by the way. Dilip Kumar Reddy, can we connect Ignition to PLC? If so, what is process? Gentlemen, then watch the sign up for the website, sign up for Inductive University, and watch all the videos. It guides you step by step. RTU, Ilyas bah, bah, Bahlali. What is RTU? Remote Terminal Units. I think last 2 minutes. So if there's any other questions, Naman, that you want me to take, let me know. I'm going through the list myself also. Is there a free version available? Yes, you can download it and play with it for free. Your channel name, my name's Rafish Shahid. You'll search for it, you'll find it. I think difference between these is kind of, I think that covers everything. Naman, anything that catches your eye in the questions?
Sure. We would be addressing, and I'm like, if you want to go ahead for 10 or 15 minutes, I'm okay.
Okay, so.
Yeah.
If any situation SCADA fails, what do next do process control? So, Prince, the way I understand your questions is, if the SCADA server fails, what are our options? So generally, in a critical situation, in a critical infrastructure, you would have two SCADA servers installed. One would be for a primary, and the second would be a backup. So in case the first server fails, the second takes over and does all the communication accordingly. So there's a primary secondary architecture that has to be designed based on the process requirement. Can you export data history from an Ignition to an Excel format? Yes, it's very easy. Again, watch the Inductive Automation University video. So that was Alex Vivas.
Okay, Rafe, we got a very interesting question. That's how SCADA can communicate with a PLC and HMI.
Well, it depends on the HMI. For PLCs, Ignition, as I kind of explained earlier, there's an OPC UA module that allows you to connect with the Modbus TCP devices, and it natively supports Ignition's built-in drivers, support connections with Siemens PLCs and Allen Bradley PLCs and Modbus TCP devices. So any PLC that supports Modbus TCP communication, you are able to connect using the OPC UA module. Any Siemens PLC that has an Ethernet port, or you can add an Ethernet port to it. You can connect using Ignition drivers, Ignition's Siemens drivers, or any Allen Bradley PLCs are natively supported using the Allen Bradley driver in the Ignition's OPC UA module. Any others? Oddball items, you would need to buy separate software called OPC server from either Kepware. I'm a Kepware person, or you can use Moticon, and there's a few others as well. Is the latest development taking place in SCADA? I would say machine learning and AI integration using IIoT. SCADA softwares are adopting to basically specializing or enabling communication using the MQTT protocol. OPC UA is not what it used to be. OPC UA was the only option. I want to was the primary option of communication. Now it's changing, and MQTT is kind of creeping its way into the SCADA industry. Can ignition run with, oh my god, a Siemens S7200? I do not recommend using Siemens S7200 PLCs. If you have some, try and encourage your management if you can to replace it with an S7 1200. Trust me, S7 1200 is less than $200. I think, Noman, that's the roughly the price, correct? Maybe 200
Yeah, but
$300. If that, take the time to replace it. It's time to throw it away. No, yes, it can. It's difficult. You need to add something that allows you to convert Siemens Ethernet ports to Siemens a Profibus. So you have a Profinet to Profibus converter. So those converters itself end up costing you a couple $100. So it's just easier to replace the PLC, buy a newer generation PLC. I really appreciate you sharing the education process, like learning SQL and Python, and first, then the ignition. Yes. Robert's actually from some, I think
so
somewhere in California. He mentioned he's joining us at 6 a.m. or 5 a.m. in the morning. So thank you so much, Robert, for joining us today.
yeah, that's why he was saying that. Can you please change the
Can you
timing of
please get started?
session?
Robert, I really appreciate you taking out the
Maybe he
time and
was.
joining.
Uh, do I need a third party to store a database or other features, or is already included in Ignition? That's a good question.
I'm not sure I understand exactly what he means, but you don't need, if you have ignition with the ignition SQL bridge module and tag historian module, you should be able to uh, put your data. So you need three: SQL bridge, and you need tag historian to be able to store data into a database, into a MySQL or Microsoft SQL Server database. So those two things I would recommend having. Can Python play any role? I think I answered that question a bit earlier. It's one of the questions. So security, or is that a step? That's a tough. Well, there's multiple ways of doing security and ignition. You could use your original Windows security that you have. You could use a separate username and password uh, list or logins than your Windows. So it depends. Different companies set it up differently. Um, Firewall
Mm-hmm.
ignition is not a firewall product. You should have a firewall, and that should be separate from ignition. So it's a SCADA product. Firewalls are a separate product. It
Yeah,
depends.
I want to
Numan,
add a light to that because I'm currently working in an OT cybersecurity. So I just wanted to add few points. There is one system security where you are actually securing that software first of all, whatever the SCADA software is. If it's a Ignition, it's a OneAware, any other SCADA, Siemens, WinCC, whatever. You have to first apply the cybersecurity measures on the software level. Once you're
Mhm.
done, then where it's installed, like for example, if it is installed in Windows 7, which should not be Windows 10 at least. So, and then you have to harden that particular Windows. If it is installed in any Windows server, then you have to do system hardening for that. Then next level is where you are going to connect that system. If you are going to connect it to internet, then you need to play around with firewalls, data diode, and other advanced cybersecurity solutions like Nizomi Guardian. You have to place that solutions in there to make sure that there is no breach. A bad actor is not getting into your system and sneaking in and trying to find out some valuable information or trying to attack your system. So these are all measures. This cybersecurity is a complete different ball game. So we can have a separate webinar. I myself wanted to have a discussion, but I started this webinar series where I would be actually bringing up industrial experts. I would be making videos, but for sure, I would be inviting experts in a different domains. Like for ignition, we had this discussion. We have a commissioning, you know, discussion, and we had already one session on industrial IoT, and I think it was with Rafe Yu. And we would be coming again and again with some other topics. Like might be we see some other questions from your end, and we can come up with some separate sessions. So let's get into next question. Has ignition template or symbols to follow
Yes, it
good
does.
practices to make? Yeah.
Yes, it does. So you can download a bunch of Ignition has this thing called um, there's a space called in Ignition where you can share your projects, and Inductive Automation has demo projects for show you what is the good practice in developing a project. So you can get demo projects, or you can use the demo project I showed you today as a template and start building a project accordingly. So yes, it does. The role of SCADA in automation is the same as DCS. I don't want to answer that question. Numan, I'll let you answer this one.
Yeah, please. So what we have in a DCS, DCS is a PLC or DCS. Both are a factory-centered devices. Like these are like when you talk about PLC, DCS, both are factory-centered systems. When you talk about SCADA, it's specialized for remote connectivity. So you can't say like these, like the main function of that SCADA system, it can be actually connected locally also, as I discussed in last video about SCADA system. If you haven't watched it, go ahead and watch it, because I don't want to waste any single chance to promote my videos. That's why.
So we're both
But
here
it's
trying to
really
promote our videos. Yeah.
yeah, but Rafe have a very very good YouTube channel, by the way, guys. I haven't actually talk about that. Please go ahead, and if you want to watch videos in Urdu session, like Urdu sessions in related to SCADA and control system, please follow his YouTube channel. You can follow his LinkedIn, and I would try to post all information about Rafe into description of this video once this live gets over. I know most of the people are still here to know about the certificate process, how to get a certificate. We would get three people as per commitment from this live session, and one is already picked up, and two others I'm trying to figure out who would be that. So three people from the comments would be picked up, and what you have to do is you have to do this session, like you have to follow this session, and at the end of the session, once this live is up there, you have to comment, and you have to comment your email address. Otherwise you can reach me on my Instagram that you are part of that live webinar, and I can connect you and would get your email address and share you a certificate. So either way, I'm good with that. But don't come to don't try to contact me on LinkedIn and Instagram just for sharing that you been there. I haven't seen you here in the chat comments. Then I would not allow you to give you that certificate. Only three people who were part of that live discussion would be entitled, and these would be through the comments, not anyone who is a silent watcher here, and he just watched the video maybe in just 2 or 3 seconds and trying to come up later on to give a certificate. That would not work. So just a clarity on that. What is okay? Next question is, what is use of fiber? Fiber media converter in industrial communication. Rafi.
Numan, you want to take this?
Yeah, that's
Well,
fine. Yeah, you if you want to take it, I'm okay with that.
Well, it's a me five. So sometimes when you're running Ethernet cables, there's a certain limit on how long the Ethernet cable can
Yeah.
be between a PLC to PLC or a PLC to an ignition or any SCADA server. In that situation, where the distance between the two or is more than the set limit, or in a situation where you are in a factory environment where there's a lot of electromagnetic interference, you want to use, instead of Ethernet cables, you'd be running fiber optic cables. And in order to convert an Ethernet signal to a fiber optic signal, you would use the Ethernet to fiber converters. How
So we got a next question. Okay. Okay. I think is this a comment? That's a good thing. Okay, but one of important question, which I want to
uh,
also hear from you.
I don't want to make comparisons here today. Well, the biggest advantage with Ignition, I found, is number one, the ease of use. Number two is the ease of learning.
Mhm.
With other SCADA platforms, I believe Ignition is easier to learn. As I just showed you, you can just sign up on a website and start learning it right away. You don't really need a teacher or somebody who is there, and then you're attending classes or anything like that. So that's the first. Uh, the class has its value. I have personally gone to the IA headquarters and attended classes multiple times. It has a lot of value. I will not say that you those are not important, but you can get started. In order to get started with other platforms, it's a bit harder. Ignition gives you unlimited licensing. Number one. Number two, and as I showed in one of the software stacks when I was discussing, Ignition can be installed on any platform. So you can install it on Windows, you can install it on Linux, you can install it on an Apple computer, no problem. That independence is not available with other platforms. And it's unlimited tags. So you can connect with, once you have an Ignition full license, you can have 500 PLCs that you can connect to. You can have 5 million tags you can connect to. There's no limitation. All the other software platforms, they charge you with the by the number of devices or tags you connect with. The third thing also is you can have a connection to multiple databases at the same time. So with Ignition, you can have a connection to 5 different MySQL databases, or you can have a connection to a MySQL database. You can have a connection to an Oracle database, and you can have a connection to a Microsoft SQL Server database at the same time, without having to purchase additional software licenses. Um, it's ease of use, the support for the new and upcoming MQTT protocol. Um, and globally, look, the most important thing is, I mean, global giants. Technically, I can't name the company for some reason, but the world's most famous electrical car company is using this. So you guess it.
Okay.
so
Then we
so
got
why
a
are they
comment
using
from.
it? Because it's a good platform.
Mhm. So Rafi, we got another comment from Robert. You want to read
Thank
it?
you, Robert.
It's there on the screen. Okay, sunrise
Oh,
picture, which is very.
Robert, I will want. I mean, next time I'm in California, I'll give you a call. I would love to have a cup of coffee with you. Thank you so much for joining the session, mate.
Okay, I think we are having a short time now, and I would be getting you guys, like I would connect with 3 people. Please, everybody wants this live session, and please write a comment at that time, because this live comment would not be available after this discussion. And I wanted to pick up 3 people, and please connect with me on Instagram. Everybody who was a part of that live webinar, connect with me on Instagram. Either you can send me your email address over there. Otherwise, I would write email address that's into description of this video. About Instagram, this is my Instagram. If everybody is not aware about that, I'm putting it here into screen. Anyone who is not aware, he can have a look at that, and he can also get information about my Instagram through last video, and I would update into live session here. And please, everyone who is watching this, especially if you are interested to learn automation in Hindi or Urdu language, I do recommend you watch Rafi Shah's YouTube channel. I would update his YouTube channel link into description of this video once our live session would end. So thank you, Rafi, for sparing your time again. And I think it's the
Absolutely.
third time, and I want to see you more and more.
I absolutely love these sessions with you, Noman. Thank you so much for taking out the time and arranging these. I sometimes it's kind of difficult to get away from things and getting into this, and I really appreciate you, dragging me, kicking and screaming into these video sessions.
Yeah. It's nice to have you, because it's motivate me also, and also we would be bringing more industrial experts also in these sessions. And I got few questions about online training. We do provide online trainings about PLC, DCS, SCADA, and HMI. If you guys are really interested to join a mentorship program, what I mean by that is mentorship is quite different. As per, when you go for a normal training, it's not like that. Mentorship is just picking up your hand, like, and trying to make it sure, like, for example, what is my way in these classes, and what are other instructors that are part of IT and Automation Academy's family, how they train. We are going to do one thing in front of you, and then we will ask you to do that. And if you are not able to do that, the person would be there to help you to make sure that you are doing it. It's not like that we did our session and then we are done. We are going to make sure that you are able to capture that information. So if you guys are interested, you can also get connected with my WhatsApp number. My team would definitely respond you on that, and we can set up some session. And about today's session, I really appreciate again Rafe for joining in, and would announce definitely three winners in next class, and I would send them also certificate. Everybody please join Instagram. If you want to get the update earlier, I would announce it tonight on Instagram, 3 winners who were part of that webinar. And we would continue this process, bringing more and more industrial experts to talk about different topics. Thanks for watching, and till next video, take care and Allah Hafiz.
Thank you, everybody. Allah Hafiz.
Thank you.